Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Chad. We'll start off with that, and then afterward we'll flip through this book and I'll show you lots of cool pictures of Chad. Let me get pencil. So Chad is located in Central Africa, kind of like the northernmost part of Central Africa. And it has some very distinct geographic zones, as you can tell by this map here. So let's just go top to bottom. So we start up here. You can see the Sahara Desert dominates this area up here. The top half of Chad is very rocky with some very, very interesting mountains and rock formations. Right here you can see the Tibesti Mountains. They are very old rocks in terms of like rocks on Earth, basically. And right here, it's not labeled, but you can see it very clearly. This is Emikusi. It's a volcano. This mountain is the highest point in Chad, and it's also the highest point in the Sahara Desert. Over here, we have the Enedi Plateau. There are lots of rocks over here, but they're much newer and they're very, very interesting. Some of them are very bizarrely shaped. It's one of those places on Earth that does not look like it's on Earth. It looks Martian or some other planet. It reminds me actually of, like the old Looney Tunes cartoons with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. And there would be like really weird rocks in the backgrounds of those cartoons. They look like that, but again, I'll show you pictures in here of these really interesting rocks. So we have mountains over here, and right in the middle we get Harmattan winds that blow out. You can even see the marks that the winds make in satellite views of Chad. It blows out into this region over here, into the Sahelian zone. The Erg du Jarab, you can see here, is the lowest point in Chad. The winds just kind of blow over and smooth things out, so it is, dry and hot and windy and sandy, but as you can tell, there are many more places that people live. Faya and Fada being like the two main large places, largest populations at least. There's also lots of really interesting lakes and things in this area, but again, this map doesn't really show them. This is a very dry, very unforgiving terrain, but there are lots of areas where there's underground water, so people survive off of that. We move down more toward this area down here. This is the Sudanian zone. So obviously you can see Sudan right here. So it's a Sudanian type of desert where, again, it is sandy and dry and rocky, but much more suited for human habitation and farming and things like that. You can see some waterways exist in this area, but by far the most important geographic area in this part of Chad is Lake Chad, where the country gets its name. Lake Chad used to be one of the biggest lakes in Africa, probably at its biggest point, like tens of thousands, millions of years ago. It was probably like the biggest lake. It could have like taken up this whole space here. But it has shrunk down considerably, especially in the past 40-50 years or so, not just from climate change, but from people using more water than gets naturally put back in from rains and things like that. It has shrunk down considerably. Most of it is in Chad, but it used to be far, far larger. Then we move down to this green area down here. This is the Ghanaian zone, and as you can see, it's very green. It's very jungly, very lush. This is more of like the typical like Africa jungle forest, rainforest, where you have like the elephants and the giraffes and basically exactly what you picture when you think of African forest. This is it here. There's national parks in this region. Again, lots of animals, lots of plants and things like that. And here you can see the capital city of N'Djamena. And I believe it's the largest city in Chad as well. It's right on the Chari River, making up this border right here. It's the longest river in Chad, and as you can see, there are lots of tributaries and other rivers that go through this area, helping make it very lush and green. So Chad has lots of very interesting climates and zones, but it is very, very dominated by its desert area, especially since the Sahara is expanding and could take up more in the future. But people across Africa in this Sahel zone are doing all they can to try to prevent desertification to their countries. The borders of Chad, as you can see, it is landlocked. It is bordered by Libya, Sudan, the Central African Republic, Cameroon, and a little border here with Nigeria and Lake Chad, and Niger over here. And I think that's it for geography. That's the gist of it. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but that's basically everything you need to know about the geography of Chad. So, as I was saying, this desert up here, the Sahara, the largest desert in the world, at one point in history, it was much, much smaller. This area up here was actually pretty lush and green and pretty fertile. The early humans that lived here were like farmers and herders, basically. And there are some really cool rock drawings, I'll show them to you in here, where they painted like cows eating grass. So obviously that doesn't exist in this area anymore, but we definitely know it did at one point. The most major group of people to live in this area would have been the Kanem Empire. It was later the Kanem-Bornu empires. They absorbed two empires together. It formed in around the first millennium CE. It dominated pretty much all of what is Chad today and a lot of other regions around here. It was mainly in this area, but it was the most dominant group of people in Chad, at least like empire civilization, mainly because they controlled the trans-Saharan trade. So obviously there's not much here in terms of like resources, but it did have roads that crossed through to get to some of the major cities in this end and the major cities over here on this end. So the Kanem Empire controlled those, and when you control the trade routes, you basically control the trade, which makes you very, very powerful. They were eventually, over a long period of time, weakened after conflicts with other powers in this area, like the Wadai Empire, and mainly the Sultanate of Baguirmi throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, which made it very easy for Europeans to swoop in and just claim the land for themselves, which France was the one to claim Chad. They secured it as a colony by the year 1920, and if you've seen some of my other videos, I've covered a lot of West African countries, a lot of which were controlled by France, and those countries had lots of resources and coastlines and all sorts of benefits for France. Well, Chad basically didn't really have anything for France to provide to them. So they introduced cotton in 1929 and created a thriving cotton industry, which is still around to this day. But that's basically all that Chad was good for, to the French at least. France mainly focused their sights on the southern area of Chad. You can see the capital here. It used to be called Fort Lamy. It's its French name, basically, before it was changed much, much later. And they basically ignored this whole region up here because, like I said, not a lot of benefit to France. Not to mention, this area down here was predominantly Christian. This area up here was predominantly Muslim. So France mainly considered or concerned themselves with this part of Chad, which of course created a lot of differences between these two, not just like cultures and religions, but basically splitting the country in two so that this area of Chad was more developed, they had more infrastructure, more educational options, and these people were just kind of left high and dry because they were nomads, they were Muslims, they had a different culture, they wouldn't assimilate to a French culture, you know. So eventually, after World War II, after that whole to-do was over, France made Chad an overseas territory in a bid to get the ball rolling in terms of independence, which would eventually happen on August 11th, 1960. The first president of Chad was named Francois Toumbalbaye, and he was part of the Sara ethnic group, which is, even to this day, the most dominant ethnic group throughout Chad. Chad has over 200 different ethnic groups inside of it, all very different, all very unique, all very wonderful, of course. It's just one of those situations where when Europe made all the lines and the borders, they didn't consider all of the different groups that live there, and the fact that one group wouldn't really want to be dominated by the other group. So people who weren't Sara weren't getting their interests met by a Sara president, and that made them very angry. Again, the Sara were dominant down here, ignoring the people up here. And they were very mad about it. And it eventually led to a civil war in 1965. In 1975, Toumbalbaye was killed by the rebels. And by 1979, one of the main leaders of the rebel group, Hissène Habré, took over the capital and therefore controlled Chad. I believe, I didn't write it down, I believe he's the one that changed the name to N'Djamena, trying to make Chad more African. He also made people who had French names change their names. Hissène Habré was not a good person, okay? Like, just to demonstrate how bad he is, he's currently serving a life sentence for crimes against humanity. So that's how bad he was. He was not a good ruler. But I should say there was one interesting way that the civil war came to a close thanks to Habré. Libya up here was assisting one of the major rebel groups for its own benefit. It planned on taking over like this whole region of Chad, and I think it's because they thought maybe there was oil in it. I don't know. They wanted this territory. Maybe just like, maybe if they got one piece, maybe they could get more. I don't know. They really wanted it. I couldn't really find any reasons why Libya wanted this territory up here so bad. There's really nothing there. It's just rocks and sand and wind. But Habré united the people against Chad, or the people of Chad against Libya, once they realized that Libya had not great intentions with Chad, and basically pushed the Libyans out and managed to keep this part of their country. Eventually, after many horrific things Habré did in Chad, which I'm not going to mention on a relaxation channel, he was overthrown in 1990 by a man named Idriss Déby, and he took control of Chad. And not as horrifying as Habré, but not the, I mean, he was still like a dictator, right? So anyway, moving on. Oil was discovered in Chad, and in 2003 an oil industry sprang up. In order to export this oil, they constructed a pipeline through the country, through Cameroon, and out to their, oh, you can't see in the shot, out to the coast. Cameroon has a coastline, a really long, really wonderful coastline. So Cameroon and Chad have that going on. And this was seen as like a huge blessing. Debbie said that the money from oil would first go to the government and then it would wind up trickling down to the people of Chad. And it never really did that. By 2005, people were very, very mad. Debbie, of course, being more supportive of these people down here, not so much these people up here. These people were still upset about not having proper representation and not receiving all the benefits that they were promised from the oil industry. So a second civil war broke out. It also didn't help that this was during the Darfur situation over in Sudan. The war started in 2005. It was a couple years before that where refugees from Darfur were coming into Chad seeking help, and tensions arose from that. Not to get into that in a relaxation channel, but that definitely fueled the fire of the Civil War. It was during this time that Debbie removed presidential terms from the Constitution so that he could run as many times as he wanted. People were very mad about that, obviously. In 2010, a peace agreement that was worked out between Chad and Sudan and all the rebels, and the Civil War came to an end. That doesn't mean that fighting doesn't still go on in Chad. There are still lots of groups that don't support the government and fight back. There's also a slight Boko Haram presence in Chad that Chad is fighting against. But in April 2021, during a fight with one of these rebel groups, President Deby was killed. And his son, Mahmat Deby, was named the interim president until the next election. And we'll find out what is going to happen to Chad when that happens. Deby, like I said, has been president since 1990. So whatever happens, it really doesn't matter who comes into control next. It's going to be a whole new chapter in Chad's history. So, on one hand, it's really upsetting that their president was killed that way. On the other hand, it's the end of a dictatorship in a way. And we'll see what happens to Chad after there. Hopefully good things, because as you'll see in this book, Chad is an absolutely gorgeous country. Very underrated. It's basically viewed not just for Africa, but most of the world. It's called the dry heart of Africa because of how barren and dry the desert zones are. But, I think there's something very beautiful about this kind of desert. I'll show you some pictures. There's a very happy, smiley face right there. We've got some military men, it looks like, going through the streets here. And we've got some nomads on camels. Yeah, I think it's kind of beautiful. Here's a campaign poster for Idris Deby during the last election, 2016, which he obviously won. Here's a little oasis in the desert. See, I think it's a really beautiful place. Very I don't know, do you see what I mean with the Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner? I'll show you some more pictures. Here's another little oasis. This is one of the lakes I was telling you about that's not on the map up here, but look at this. That's so pretty. Here's what I'm talking about. Big dry rocks. This is the Entity Plateau. So all those Harmattan winds blowing through created these really strange rock formations, and some of them look like this, like Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner rocks, right? That's what I immediately think of when I see rocks like that. Isn't that strange how it's so balanced like that? Very beautiful. Here's an adax. It's a kind of gazelle, antelope, something like that. And here's some giraffes getting a little drink. What else do we have? This is N'Djamena, capital city. Here's the rock art I was telling you about. You can see lots and lots of cattle. There's the herder. There's a big cow. And look at the little cow. Here's a drawing of Lake Chad. This is from 1860. Is that a hippo? I think it is. Kind of looks like a bear, but it's definitely a hippo. So So this was President Maloum. He was president after Tambalbaye was killed. And this is Jacques Chirac signing an agreement of some kind to strengthen military cooperation, the caption says. Here's Hissène Habré. And here's Idriss Déby. And this is how cool, like this book is so new, which now of course it's out of date because Idriss Déby has passed away, he's no longer president, but this is how new the book is. This is talking about how COVID-19 affected the world and Chad. That's how new this book is. That's so cool. A really cool statue. This must be in the capital city. There's the flag of Chad, which is almost identical to the Romanian flag. Apparently the blue color is slightly different. This is, it says days after the 2016 elections. Those must have been the winners. There's Idriss Déby, and here's some people voting. Lots of pictures from 2016, it looks like. The newspapers. It looks like he's got some figurines for sale down here. I bet they're really, really neat. You can't really see in here because he's sitting in the shade. It's probably a very hot day. They use the CFA franc, which a lot of West African countries use. This person here is mining for salt in the desert. One of the few things that you can harvest from the desert. Here's a little, looks like a little compound home here. This is talking about how most people in Chad don't have electricity. They just make do. Looks like she's got her cow or something she's helping to herd. Here's some oil being drilled. These people are getting some water, filling up these drums here, probably to take back home. Oil refinery being protected. Some beautiful elephants, being very sweet, of course. And this guy looks like he's got some kind of cabbage farm or lettuce or something. Which is awesome. I like this picture. This person looks very interesting, doesn't they? Here's a nomadic person getting a drink of water. These people are from the Tubu tribe up in the Sahara. These are Nigerians who are refugees. Looks like they're praying here. Yeah, they're praying. And these are Fulani people, another ethnic group that lives in Chad. And many other African countries in this area as well. This is in N'Djamena. Looks like a marketplace or some. Yeah, it must be a marketplace. Yep, street markets. Selling food and handmade items. More wonderful smiles. It says here these children are playing. So this is their little playground, which when you're a kid, all you really need is an open space and your imagination. Oh, that's sweet. Mother and child. Another wonderful face carrying her baskets. Centre de Santé, the health center. Talks about here, they're making sure that children get vaccinated. Very important. Here's a really beautiful minaret in a mosque. It says this is a traditional dance that they're doing. That's the same mosque, right? That's the same minaret. This is in Faya. Look at the donkeys. And this is the Grand Mosque of N'Djamena. And this is the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace in N'Djamena. Taking the oath of office. And here's the ballot from the 2016 election. Really clever system, so you can see those potatoes. He's part of the potato party, I suppose. This guy's cows. What they stand for. Maybe it's like more potatoes for everyone party. Some children, it looks like they're the future soldiers of Chad. They got all green berets too. Let's see. Haggling in the street market. Looks like they're selling some fruit or vegetables. A really beautiful carving. Isn't that lovely? Very well done. It takes a lot of talent to do that. Some big pots. Says it stores food. This is a balafon. It's a musical instrument. You hit these with the hammers. It's really beautiful sounding. These guys are herding their goats. Another wonderful face. It doesn't say here, but I'm pretty sure that he's Sarah because they have these scars on their faces that are like, I suppose, like beauty marks. It's kind of hard to describe. A little village here. You can see all the little houses and their little yards. I'm sure it's very communal there. This guy's trying to get some good reception, it looks like. I'm sure that's very hard to do in the desert. A little house. And some sweet camels getting a drink. And children playing their hoops. And they're playing in the Chari River, it says. Don't you remember that feeling when you were little and you'd squish your toes in the mud? It felt so good. Camel racing. So this is a tradition that many people do in the Sahara, part of big festivals. It's basically the equivalent of like a rodeo. It's a big gathering of lots of different games, but camel racing is like always the major thing. There's a picture of Mecca, because this is talking about what Islam is and their holidays. More goats. This is for Eid, where it's traditional to slaughter a goat and share it with everyone. President on Independence Day 2020, it says. He's wearing his mask, being safe. Dinner's on the stove. Making something yummy, I'm sure. See what else we have in this chapter. A fisherman out on the river. And these are baked millet balls. I bet they're pretty crunchy. I think that's actually the end. Yeah, we just got some pictures of some dishes. Red beans and coconut sauce. And sweet potato and okra stew. Which one would you rather eat? I think I'd go for the red beans. You can't go wrong with beans. So yeah, that's the end of our book. Let's look at this cool map. You can see all the different districts. You can see more of these lake areas here. You can see the big mountains. And yeah, you can see Lake Chad there too. So, oh, and that's where Chad is located, right there in Africa. So that's going to be the end for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very